Is the Securities Exchange Commission the enemy of crypto? No, the regulators are not the enemy of crypto. Guys, let's be honest here. Our space created BitConnect, OneCoin, Mt. Gox, BitMEX, Crypty, thousands and thousands and thousands of scams that have hurt people. Regulators are like vampires in a good way. They come in when you invite them. Okay, vampire stands at the door, says, "Can I come in?" You say yes. What brings a regulator into an industry? Happy, well-functioned industry that are just everything is going right and everybody's thinking, like, how many regulators are there for mathematics? Is there the Mathematics Exchange Commission that sits down and says, we really need to look into those topologists? Those combinatorists, they're slippery, slippery people. Oh, we are deeply concerned about statistics. Yeah, there's some problems there, man. Serious problems. 64% of people know that. No, because it's like, what scandals occur in the mathematical world? Occasionally you have an older Fields medalist who claims he proved the Riemann hypothesis and turns out his brain's baked and it's a garbage paper. Okay, we're pretty good at self-regulating in that industry. On the other hand, why is the pharmaceutical industry regulated? Because they make stuff that you put into people's bodies. And if they fuck that up, they break your penis, they break your brain, they break your eyes, you go deaf. Okay, there's more than one people have gone deaf from an adverse reaction to an antibiotic. There are all kinds of bad things that can occur. So you need to regulate it because there are perverse incentives against your health. It's not just could harm occur, it's also the incentive set. If I make drugs, my incentive is maximal distribution and maximal money. Okay, that doesn't necessarily correlate to the safest product, the soundest product, the most efficacious product. The best case scenario is I could sell snake oil. The worst case scenario is the snake oil can kill you. What happened? 19th century, you had all these charlatans running around. Rockefeller's father, David Avery Rockefeller, he sold snake oil. It went all around, okay, selling stuff that didn't work, and it was loaded with laudanum and cocaine and all kinds of horrible stuff. So you regulate it. Why? Because you notice that the market's behaving badly and it's killing people. So let's look at crypto. You have the ICO boom. You have tons of scandals and scams. You have rampant insider trading. You have wash trading on exchanges. You have exchanges failing and the principals of the exchanges stealing the money and fleeing abroad. You have software flaws that were made on purpose to steal people's money. You have massive misrepresentations. You have impersonations. You have people claiming they're using project capital for something, but they're actually using to buy yachts and Miami houses and prostitutes and rah, rah, rah. That is a big neon sign at the front of your door, vampire come in. Our industry did that. We didn't self-regulate. We didn't stop the agency failures. We created a neon sign and welcome to vampire. And now they're here. And we're going to complain that they're doing stuff, filing lawsuits, getting involved like a bull in a china shop. Of course they are. And their ability to act is proportional to the sophistication of the tools and the modernity of the laws. The Howey test is an artifact of the 1940s. It cannot work in stem cell finance, where an asset can be everything. It can be a currency, a commodity, and a security, all at the same time. It can be everything and nothing. It's like some fucking Buddhist koan. Okay? We've invited them in, and now they're doing their best job to sort the whole thing through. So people look at Ripple, for example, and they say, oh, how dare the SEC do this? They're destroying innovation. And they say, guys, we are a consumer protection agency. Our job is to hold businessmen accountable when they do nasty things. Okay. And why are they involved with Ripple? Is it because deep down inside, they absolutely want Ripple to be a security? Probably not. They're unhappy with Ripple because the principals of the company sold $600 million of XRP to retail investors and paid themselves that. Guys, when I got paid to build Cardano, we received about 2.4 billion ADA. It's about 8% of the supply. Now, the market value of that from the pre-sale was $6 million, give or take. And it was a huge risk because who knows, 3,000 cryptocurrencies, the vast majority are flops. So we didn't know where it was going to go, but we decided just to hold it. So we created a vesting thing and said, we're not even going to be completely unvested until 2019. I remember when ADA went to $1.30 and I was sitting on $2.4 billion, 2.4 billion ADA, which was worth almost $3 billion. And we didn't sell. We sold none of it. Zero. It was just sitting there. And every day I was looking at that and saying, we're in a bubble. These markets are not sustainable. Holy shit. I'm a billionaire from this one thing in my company register. There's no regulation or law that prevents me from doing something, but I felt it was irresponsible to sell. I self-regulated as a company. Now, other people sold. EOS sold. They sold $4 billion of an asset. And the SEC certainly went after them, but only fined them $24 million and let them keep the $4 billion. So I was so upset when that happened. I was like, okay, but that's just the way it works. And so XRP, they sold 600 million, actually sold $1.3 billion worth of the asset. And, the SEC saw that, and obviously they thought that was Enron-like behavior, bad behavior. That's why when I read the 71 pages, I thought for sure they were trying to build a 10b5 case. So it's strange that they're just going after a refund. But it's clear why that vampire came into the house. But you have to self-regulate. You have to have principles. You have to have ethics. You have to accept that sometimes you can't do things that even though are in your best interest because you have a moral responsibility for everyone else. And at that time, it made no sense to do a mass divestment at the top of a bubble in an ecosystem. We held, and that holding lost 90% of its value. Is what it is. I've lost more money on paper than most people will make in a lifetime, in 100 lifetimes, in 1,000 lifetimes. You say, oh, well, turn the page, move on. It is what it is. That's life. Why the Securities Exchange Commission exists is because not everybody would make that decision. And sometimes they do it differently. And if they do it differently in a way that harms a small scale buyer, investor, other person, that's a moral hazard. And if you allow that to happen unfettered, then you have markets that basically are a wealth transfer mechanism from the poor to the rich. That's why the SEC was created. 1933. What happened? 1929 was the beginning of the Great Depression from the collapse of the markets. Why did that happen? You had radically inaccurate information being broadcasted out. You had boiler rooms. You had tons of speculation that was very unhealthy. You had people borrowing 10 times the amount of money that they made per year to trade stocks that turned out weren't even real. They were based on fantasies. And people with insider information were trading against that. And they knew when the symphony was going to come to an end before anybody else. And they made huge profits on the backs of the poor. And so when the poor voted, they threw Hubert Hoover out of office and they put in a guy who promised that he'd rebalance the scales for them. That's where the SEC came from. And they've had an 80-plus year mandate where sometimes they succeed and sometimes they fail. I'm deeply disturbed, for example, where Chinese companies list on U.S. exchanges and they're not subject to the same transparency requirements as Microsoft and Apple and these things. That's a serious problem. And when they do get involved, they get involved in a very ham-fisted way. And it is what it is. You have to deal with it. Who is ultimately negligent? It's not the Securities Exchange Commission. It's the United States House of Representatives. It is a job of the Congress and the Senate to update regulations and to create new regulatory agencies as technology evolves. Where is the cryptocurrency legislation? They've known about the industry for 10 years, and because they can't agree on anything, even a fucking $600 check, because they're just a bunch of cocksucking piece of shit assholes who only care about themselves and their popularity and their reelection potential, and they don't give a damn about America or a damn about our industry, they've allowed regulation to stagnate. and FinCEN and the CFTC and the SEC and all these other agencies are left to somehow find a way to better procrustes 80-year-old regulation to a field that is like stem cell finance. It's impossible. And they're doing their best. The SEC has actually had a very light hand. It's insulting when the Ripple principals go, they're destroying the whole industry. Guys, there were, I think, over 1,000 ICOs. They've only had a few dozen enforcement actions, most of which were clear and obvious frauds. Some were geopolitical, like Telegram, for example. And where and when they could come to an amicable solution, more often than not, they found a way to do that and had the decency to contact people and talk to them. Ripple's acting like suddenly out of the blue, something has just magically happened. Why do you have a tolling agreement with the SEC then? Where the fuck did that come from, Brad? You were talking to these guys for a while, and obviously your negotiations broke down. When you threatened to move the company to the UK, that was a bellwether for that. So it's a complex topic. There's a lot of nuances here. There's a lot of idiots in the space that just go, well, this is a security and this is a security and the SEC is going to do this and Bitcoin is king and rah. You know, like Max Kaiser and Tone and these other guys. They're just frothing for the mouth, idiots. And they don't really understand how this works. At the end of the day, the regulation doesn't matter. As an entrepreneur, I cannot follow regulation completely and perfectly because I'm doing new things in 52 fucking countries. There's no way to be in full compliance with every single thing. No company in the history of humanity in the world has made every jurisdiction and dominion that they operate in 100% happy 100% of the time. So what you do is you have a transcendent principle. Is what I'm doing ethical? Is what I'm doing moral? Is what I'm doing obviously good for the consumer? And if you can't answer that with a yes, then you're probably at some point going to piss off a regulator, if anything, because you're creating a political incentive for the regulator to go after you. Facebook is not really violating laws as they're written, but they're being sued by 48 states for antitrust. They rock the boat too much with Libra, with the censorship of free speech, with the appearance of picking sides in elections. You piss off half the country, you could be motherfucking Teresa. And you know what's going to happen? You're going to be hit with a lawsuit by some government agency somewhere. Trump, love him or hate him, when he leaves office, somewhere, some state, somehow, is going to try to charge him with a crime. Because there's big political kudos to being the Kingslayer and putting a guy like that in jail. Maybe they work, maybe they don't work. It's politics. Politics is about appeasing people when injustices come. Like the pharma bro, Schreckel. You know, he's a villain in the press. He raises the price of drugs too high. It doesn't matter if he actually commits a crime or not. The appearance of his character creates a big red target on his back. So you know what? I just start from, is it ethical? Is it moral? And am I screwing people or not? I always try to make sure that the answers are yes, it's ethical, it's moral, and no one's being screwed in the process. And when I know something, you know something. We try to make things as transparent as we can. Now, obviously, we have a general counsel who's a domain expert in securities laws and these things. And we're a software company. We build protocols. We don't do trading and market making. We don't do ICOs. We stay out of those markets, okay? But at the end of the day, because we build protocols, we have to understand these things. And we take a step back and we follow those basic principles. And we try to stay within that framework. And we try to be good actors as much as we can. The problem is everybody's terrified, because lawyers never give you definitive answers. They say, it depends. For example, in the SEC filing, they said, well, the CEO of Ripple got a memo from a law firm that XRP could be a security. You're damn right. In 2012, every law firm in the United States, including an analysis of Bitcoin, would write a more likely than not opinion, even if they think it's not a security, with a disclaimer that it could be. Of course they're going to say something like that because it's ambiguous. You know, it's like, who's Batman? You know, you can have a hypothesis. You know, and unless you're God and you know it's Bruce Wayne, you know, everybody picked their favorite person. You know, so of course they'd say something like that. You know, it's ambiguous. What matters is what do you do about it? How do you treat people? Do you have a privileged position over other people? And are you taking advantage of that privileged position over other people? Are you following best practices? And if you can't find best practices, are you trying to create best practices? These basic principles and things. With Ethereum, we had zero guidance. We talked to a former commissioner of the SEC. We talked to a law firm, Prior Cashman. They wrote a letter, a more likely than not opinion for us, and we thought about it. And we said, well, let's try to build something. They created a foundation. We worked with a prominent law firm, MME Partners, try to do as much as possible on the blockchain, try to make sure that everybody participated the same way. We did what we could do with zero guidance. And reasonable people could look at that and say, well, they tried their best and it ended up working, so okay, no harm, no foul. Where you get into a problem is when you play games with semantics. You're screwing people, but you're trying to be smart and outsmart people and build a structure where you win guaranteed, and then that's at the expense of someone else. Okay? So when you build in, you always get a big payout no matter what, even if the project fails. That's a moral hazard. And even if regulation hasn't evolved to a point to hold you accountable, your soul's going to corrode at some point, and people are going to know you're a scumbag. Nobody wants to do business with you. That's why Donald Trump has a terrible reputation in terms of construction and contractors and these things. Why? Because he actually told people one of his business principles was, if you don't have to pay and you think you can get away with screwing people, do it. So you have these plumbers and these electricians and these drywallers coming to his building. They'd work hundreds of hours constructing things, and then they'd send the invoice and Trump would drag his feet on it and force them to sue, hoping that they would settle for less on the invoice. He was notorious for that, notorious for defaults and bankruptcies. In fact, blacklisted from most banks for lending. And that was his character as a businessman. Now, he's not in jail, so he got away with it. But I have zero respect for that business practice. It's not ethical, it's not moral, and sure as hell is screwing poor people. And there's huge asymmetries in power there. The reason these agencies exist, the reasons why we make them vampires, they need to be strong enough to overcome the strong personalities on the other side. It is a very big problem. The regulators in some cases are co-opted by private industry. Why? Because when you're a regulator, you are paid government salary. Tell me how much a GS-13 makes. Certainly not as much as a junior associate at a law firm. You leave government, and if you were nice to the right people, somehow you get a board job. Somehow you get a job at a senior law firm. Somehow you get something, and now you're making 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures. That's a hazard, because knowing that if you're nice to certain industries that you shouldn't be nice to, you should be neutral and fair to, can result in a 9-figure job, an 8-figure job when you leave office. You might have a tendency to go down that road and be corrupted by that. They have not solved that problem. Ben Lasky is now working for Ripple. He's on their board. He destroyed the entire cryptocurrency industry in New York. And his reward is first to be paid $600 an hour trying to get people a BitLicense, and now to be a board member of Ripple. It's a disgusting thing. So it's certainly problematic. Steve Mnuchin, when he leaves the Treasury Secretary role, he's going to go right back into the banking swamp. And I guarantee he's going to be sitting as a CEO of something or an advisor of something with a 8-figure, 9-figure payout every year. And the people he took care of when he was the Treasury Secretary will be the ones cutting those checks. That's why people have problems with regulators. If they were good, virtuous, always directly aligned with the will of the consumer, would view them as positive actors like firefighters, but they're not. So it's very nuanced and mixed. And it's a very complex topic. Securities law is super complex. You go to law school for it, you study it for a while. There's so many nuances here.